starting. So, okay, right, so we're now live. So, firstly, this informal chat that we're having before we do our live podcast. Erik, I really want to thank you first for your time, because time is money.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
And as an ex-lawyer, time is definitely money.
Not so much anymore. That's one of the joys of not being a lawyer anymore.
Yeah, exactly. If we were going to let this go out on air anyway, it's just our little informal chat, just to introduce people so they've vaguely got an idea of why you and I are talking.
Hello, everyone.
Exactly. What's some strange English woman and a very bearded American guy talking about? And I'm just fascinated. Seriously, I am in love with your beard, so I'm just going to stare at your beard the whole interview. But just to introduce Erik, I'm very excited about talking to him because, one, he's now a relationship expert, which I love watching anything and listening to anything to do with relationships. So can't wait to ask you some questions. But Erik is relationship expert, previously ex-lawyer, so that's a whole transformation journey that you've done there. So I'm definitely going to get loads of amazing material from talking about that. But he's based in San Francisco, which is where I'd love to go in America. He's a bona fide real American person with a beard, and also has amazing experience and stories. So thank you for being on this hangout, which is preliminary to a podcast, Erik.
I'm excited to do it. I can't wait to be on the podcast too. It's a twofer.
Do you actually get interviews yourself? Because you do all the podcasting with the relationship couples. Do people interview you?
Yeah, I've just started to get noticed by other shows. So I've been on 20, I think you're my 21st interview in the last maybe 90 days or so.
Wow. Okay. And why are you starting to get noticed? That's not a very good coaching question. It starts with why. But for what reason, Erik? What do you think you've done to get noticed for people to want to interview you?
Well, my own platform has started to gain traction in the last however long it's been. We launched the podcast and magazine in February. Yeah. And, it started growing quickly in terms of listeners, but I think other media hadn't noticed it yet.
Yeah.
But suddenly media has been noticing what we're up to, and we've been getting written about, and I've been getting contacted by podcasters and radio shows and print publications that want to interview me. I think there's something about the story, having been a divorce lawyer for 10 years and then transitioning to having a podcast about relationships, that makes people curious.
Yeah, because it's like you're living through the transition. Your passion is becoming your fortune in a sense. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's something, everybody's so terrified about divorce. And it is scary. It's for good reason.
Yeah.
But people are so terrified of it, and everybody who's touched by it is negatively impacted, or at least that's what our imagination tells us. And
I have a really positive. This is the thing. I'm divorced, and it really gets me when I meet people and they go, "Oh, it's such a shame. Oh, oh, bless you." And it's like, I'm really happily divorced.
Yeah.
Woo!
Yeah. I agree with you. I think sometimes my work is just reminding people that the world isn't as bad as we imagine it to be.
Okay. Now I have some questions for you, because I did my research like you do. It's so funny. I was just listening to a guy that, oh my goodness, that you've probably heard of in the States. Oh my gosh, he's the dirty jobs guy. He does lots of dirty jobs. Oh my, I've just put a quote on Twitter about him. Really, like he's an interviewer, TV personality.
What a great show.
Mike Rowe.
Wow, no, don't know about it. I don't watch much though. I'm kind of a hermit these days.
Yeah. But I can't remember what I was going to say about him. But yeah, anyway, so
Dirty
that was it. Doing your research on people you're going to interview, and he says he used to do the plaque, 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 the plaque kind of research. So he'd like read the plaque underneath somebody's statue and just read a few lines on it, and then you kind of say, oh yeah, I read your book, and that's your plaque research. You know, so it makes you seem really important, but actually you haven't really got to know the bones of the person. Hence why I can do this thing like this that we do now, so you get to trust me and I get to trust you.
Right.
So I just did my plaque research on you, and I listened to your podcast you just did, how recently, with Jessica and Shane?
Oh, I released, well, let's see, we recorded that one about 2 months ago, and I released it yesterday.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So I listened to the whole thing.
Oh, right. Wow. Thank you.
So, and it was really good for a start, really professional. And the questions I have for you, well, firstly, when I was listening to Jessica and Shane, as a coach, all I'm hearing in her voice is she literally is scared. Like you can hear that somewhere in her life she has been shouted at and scared, so that she now wants to control things. As you entitle it grumpiness versus control, and they're stuck in these dynamics of their behavior. And it's fascinating to me, Erik, because I study behavior, and it sounds like you've studied, well, anyway, I want to ask you about all of that. So, and really, I found it fascinating, but really what I want to know from you is, when you're there doing that, and I know you've taken years of being a lawyer and then going into now what you do, which is your kind of who you're supposed to be, it's your kind of genetic coding. Did you learn that compassion and that listening and that patience being an interviewer and having to listen to all the underneath stuff that you're listening to Jessica, and you could probably tell her the solution, but she wouldn't get it. She has to become aware herself. Yeah. Did you learn that, or is that genetically encoded in you, Erik?
That's a fascinating question. I don't know if I have exactly the answer. I'll say that my mom is very emotionally awake, and I was raised by her alone, and the dialogue that we had in trying to understand the world was always, what is the other person in this situation that we're talking about going through? I was just reflecting on that yesterday. Coincidentally, my mom never let us talk in terms of victimization, as an umbrella concept, and it was always about what are the players in any given situation experiencing, and why might their behavior result from that, and from that place, what's the right action? And that is, I think that is encoded in her.
Yeah,
for sure. It's as deep as it can get. But I think I was taught that by her, and then as a result of that, did a lot of personal development work throughout my life.
Yeah.
And then when I was a divorce lawyer, I was exceptionally successful, and the reason, I think, is I was able to listen to what was going on below the rhetoric and get to a solution that actually resolve the situation. So people trusted me, and I think I acted with integrity. I think I deserved the trust, but because they trusted me, we were able to resolve situations.
Yeah. You learned to listen to the underlying source rather than the reactions, because I could hear it in your podcast just now. You were. You weren't listening to what she or he were saying. It was way back when, So you said you did a lot of personal development. Was that pre-lawyer, when you were doing a lot of personal development courses?
Both. I think for a good chunk of my life, I was really a personal development junkie. And I don't know about junkie, but I really love the internal inquiry. That introspective, structured introspection is just a lot of fun. I just love it. So yeah, I did a lot of work. Landmark was one of my first introductions. I don't know if you've heard of the Landmark Forum.
I was
did that
a landmark introduction leader, so I could hear landmark in you.
Yeah, I think there's some of my earliest influences. The language is still in me. It's been years since I've been involved with Landmark, but
well, you were talking to Jessica about her rackets, and you weren't naming rackets. So it was quite clearly, this is a racket you are running on chain.
Yeah.
In case anybody hasn't done Landmark, which there's a few small percentage of the population that hasn't, a racket is just something where you're kind of pretending one thing, but behind the shop there's something negative kind of running the conversation. So you might be saying nice things to people, but there's something reasonably not so good lurking in the background. Well, that's how I would say a racket anyway. What would you say?
They have a definition. I'm trying to remember. It's been, I think they say, and maybe they've changed this, but when I was around, they used to call it a persistent complaint with a consistent way of being attached to it.
That's it.
But that complaint, as you say, is in the background. So on the front, you're saying one thing, but in the background, you can sense this complaint that's driving, what you're saying in the moment.
Yeah, the way I always think of it is like it's a nunnery or a monastery, like a monk's place on the shop front, and then behind is like the liquor store, drugs, kind of what do we call it, like strip bar at the back.
That's good.
So just pretending, but yeah, you put it a lot better. But Landmark, so have you done like some neuroscience stuff, because you sounded like you could understand a lot of there was a bit of context of neuroscience in what you're talking about?
Well, when I got started as a divorce lawyer, just when I was getting started with the career, I was very, what's the word? I guess negatively impacted. I felt depressed by all these breaking relationships around me. And I got together with my best friend, who's a psychologist. And we considered what could we do to just to help, just to make relationships stronger. And we decided to create a course for couples to work on their relationships before getting married. And my friend, Katrin, is very, very academic and very detail oriented. So she said, okay, this is great, but if we're going to do a course, I want to do it right. And what she meant by that is she wanted to do all of the research and read everything that she could find. So she literally, it took us 3 years to get through the literature. We read all of the self-help books. She read all of the academic papers, and we distilled it down. I mean, the quantity of reading we did still blows my mind. So we distilled it down to a weekend-long course and then delivered a few times and then stopped doing it. But that research informed me deeply. And so it took the personal development work and gave it an academic bent, I would say.
Yeah. Wow. And you sound very much like me. Sorry, the reason I turned around was because my dog she's flipping out trying to scratch the cushions that she's sitting on. I'm just like, what are you doing?
I can't hear it.
You can't hear it?
No.
Okay. That's good. Pepper down. No, but you sound very analytical, a bit like my mind. The way I've approached coaching in the last 3.5, 4 years is I want to kind of fit all the pieces of the puzzle together. And I have kind of got there, and I've really got an interesting toolkit that I believe will work for anybody anywhere in the world. But I think the thing that I'm learning now is it's kind of my toolkit, but people have to make their own toolkit as well. And what might be my definition of passion, or actually does passion bring fulfillment, and does it bring happiness? And I think I'm getting to the point where I'm finding actually it's more just about be happy. There is no rule to happiness, and actually you might not find your passion on the way, because my strapline for my website is finding your passion. So you sound very similar to me on finding formulas and wanting to know that you've got the whole information in the world covered to make sense of it for people.
Yeah, just to sort of for the record, I guess I'm not actively coaching clients these days. I just do the show. And as you said, a lot of times the guests will want some coaching, and so it comes through. And what I've found has happened to me, and it's probably because I'm not doing it as a profession specifically. I've stopped using the tools. I had a tool bag also. Went through a coach's training program and used that tool bag specifically when I worked with clients way back in the day. And nowadays I just listen for illusion, I think. And then when I notice something that's not connected, I speak it out loud and everything unravels from there.
Wow.
And those tools do inform the process. I think they sit in the background, but I'm not conscious of them so much anymore.
Yeah, and I love that phrase, I listen for illusion. That's great, because that's kind of where the gap is in maybe some person's expectations and where the reality is, and that they're either not aware of that, or their reality and their expectations is not meeting other people's expectations or reality. Yeah, so that kind of gap or that blind spot. And what was I going to say? I think the way you're describing it, which I think for me also, is that after a while we start to absorb the information that we choose that matches us and our coding, and then push away other stuff that doesn't work for us. But I think for you, it's become genetically encoded in you, which is kind of what I talk about, so that you don't need to use the tools because they're a part of you. You've absorbed what you've needed, and then all the other stuff just doesn't work for you. And this is the thing, there is no one rule that works for somebody. So I think it's in you, and I think you I think you are a coach. I know your other things, and you're a very successful lawyer. You've ran a law firm, you run a relationship guide business, but and podcast. You're a podcaster, but I think you naturally are a coach, wouldn't you say?
It's nice of you to say. I'm honored by that title, so I won't turn it down. I'm not making money from it right now, but I do love the idea.
What if you had to describe who you were? What would you say?
God, that's such a great question. There's a part of the story that we haven't talked about, which is that after my law firm, so I discovered that my partner was up to some shenanigans and we lost the firm. And in the process of losing the firm, I guess the rest of my life, the bits that I thought were important, the money and the social status and everything, also disappeared. And I was angry and depressed. And through the process of that anger and depression, something burned away. And I was left, after about a year of sitting with that, with a kind of peace that I didn't know was possible, a kind of peace and contentment. And from that springs happiness that I also had never experienced. And in this place that I've been now for 2 years, I don't spend a lot of time thinking about who or what I am or my purpose anymore. I used to be driven by that question. What was my purpose, and who am I as a true person? And I don't know, and I don't care anymore. It really is gone as a consideration for me. So I don't know how to answer it. I podcast. I'm starting a radio show.
Yeah.
I write a lot, and it all seems to be around relationships. But I don't have an umbrella for it. I think maybe that's for other people to say how I fit into their world.
And I think in our world now, there's also a bit of a divide for people, more so with the flexibility of jobs and what is seen as a job, is that there is something that you do that makes you money, and then there are other things that you do that don't make you money. So is the thing that makes you money your main role, and then the other thing's not so important? And I was just listening to Elizabeth Gilbert yesterday, who writes amazing books, and she was talking very much about creation, and it's okay to have a day job and for your most fulfilling, passionate thing to be not making you money and stuff like that. So I think it's blown the doors off what's available for us right now as kind of creatives. I think you and I are reasonably creative in what we talk about and what we share with people. So yeah, it's interesting times.
I will say that following that, it's easy to say follow your passion. That's something that we hear tossed around a lot, and I think at the core of that is a wisdom, and it is in essence what I've done since I lost the law firm. I followed my passion, but I wasn't ever able to figure out what my passion was in the old way of being. The way I lived before, I was trying to achieve something else to know that I was okay. And I was a smart enough rat in that maze to know that that wasn't the thing to do, but I was doing it anyway. And it wasn't until my universe got cracked that I was able to let go of that pursuit. And in letting go of the trying to do that, then discovered where that joy sits. And I followed that ever since. Now I'm not driven to be something. I'm not driven to be okay.
Yeah.
I am okay.
Yeah.
And so now things unfold, and that unfolding is what I think is the core of the wisdom of following your passion. But it's hard to get to by trying. That may be circular and not helpful, but that's been my experience of it.
Yeah, I'm experiencing the same thing. I think when you become unattached to a result, you become better at it a bit. And I'm just discovering now that a lot of it is proving stuff to myself, to my dad when I was a little girl, and
right.
Now just realizing it's not about me. It's about actually leaving companies better off from my coaching, and that's just all I need to be concerned about. So, and I think with your podcasting, it's very clear you're just interested at the end of the podcast that you leave those couples better off from having had that interview. Yeah. And actually, now that you've said that, it reminds me of something else that's important to me about this show, and probably informs my interviews, which is I'm fascinated by shame and conflict. And I'm fascinated them particularly because on the one hand, I experience both of them. And on the other hand, I'm also unattached to them nowadays. I know that they're not necessary and they don't feel real anymore. And so through the course of the interview, I like to explore shame and conflict. From where do they arise? And where does our attachment to them exist? And how can we as listeners, because I guess I consider myself a listener too, how can we as listeners learn from the couple about how to detach from our own shame? And that's just fascinating, never-endingly fascinating to me. Great topic. You know Brené Brown?
Yes, she does some great work around shame. Absolutely wonderful.
Amazing. Absolutely love her. Love her to bits. Well, I'm going to probably bring this to a close because there's so much more to talk about, and we're going to discuss it in the podcast. And just looking at, I've pretty much asked you most of the questions I wanted to cover in this section. So if you're okay with it, we'll end this section and then go to the podcast.
Great.
Okay. Thanks, Erik.
Thanks.